Welcome to Surviving to Thriving, the podcast for women ready to reclaim their energy, clarity, and life. I'm Dr. Rachel Yeager, and I know what it's like to feel exhausted, overwhelmed, and stuck. Here, we go beyond quick fixes to explore the science and soul of healing, covering stress resilience, brain reset, hormone balance, nervous system support, and connecting with your intuition. If you're ready to stop surviving and start thriving, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Okay, have you ever felt like you're here but not fully here? Or like you're walking through your life, but it feels like you're in a dream? Like it feels super weird, almost two-dimensional, or I don't know, there's not really a better way to put it other than dreamlike. It just feels like something is very off. And then on top of that, you have a small flavor of feeling like you're at the end of your rope. So like you're exhausted from your health symptoms, you're trying to hold it together. You're literally just surviving day to day, and your mind doesn't feel solid. And then you have the weird dreamlike state, lost. What is happening? Am I going crazy? Kind of feeling happening in your brain. And it's really scary when your body is sick. And it's even scarier when your perception starts to feel unstable. This is derealization. It can also be depersonalization, which is more like when you feel like yourself isn't real. But this shows up in Lyme and autoimmunity. And I don't think that it's purely psychiatric, psychological. It's very much physical brain inflammation. I know because I've experienced this myself and I've helped a lot of people come out of this. And so I don't think that these anti-inflammatory tools we use would work if this was purely like your brain's just going crazy now for no reason. Like I think there's a reason. So derealization, to dive into this more, because that's the topic of today. A lot of people don't have the words to, they don't know that it's called derealization, but they describe the world feels really far away or feels really flat. Like colors feel muted. My emotions feel muted. Sounds even feel strange. Time feels distorted. You feel like you're outside of your surroundings and like you're kind of looking down in on your body at the same time as too far in to have a view of everything that's happening in your life. One thing I've noticed come up a lot is that driving feels really strange. It's like you're, I don't know, almost like watching yourself drive, or the processing of what you're seeing feels very two-dimensional, and you notice, that's weird. I usually don't feel like this when I drive. Like you're not able to process a bunch of stimuli at once. Some people even describe their life feels like a simulation. Like I feel like I'm a character in a video game. So this is more like derealization classically. And there is a derealization, depersonalization disorder that is known in the psychiatric community. But in chronic illness, this is not a primary psychiatric disorder. It's a neuroinflammatory state being caused by the physical inflammation in the brain. Because remember, your brain is just an organ in your body. So if you're having inflammation from something really severe, like Lyme, or you're having autoimmune stuff, those are really significant immune inflammatory states. It usually takes something that's really causing a high level of inflammation to get to the state where we have derealization. So histamine is a really common one. Both Lyme and autoimmune stuff create like a histamine storm in the brain. And then we feel super, super weird. And some people actually notice that they feel almost like they took Benadryl or something. And obviously Benadryl is meant to block your histamine, but a change in histamine, high or low, can still have some of the same feelings, even though one is high and one is low. So the immune system, when we have chronic stuff going on, it activates our brain's microglia. They are sounding the fire alarm in our brain, and we get all these inflammatory chemicals. We get glutamate shifts. Glutamate is one of our excitatory brain neurotransmitters, and it's high in things like seizures, and it makes us feel really overstimulated and really off. We get mast cell activation. They're releasing histamine and a bunch of similar things to histamine. And then our cortisol rhythm destabilizes. So we end up with insomnia and other things, and we might have weird cravings, not feel very awake, or feel super tired, or feel really wired because our cortisol rhythm gets off. And our brain goes into protection mode, like survival mode. And one of the ways that the brain protects itself is it alters our perception. So, derealization is often the brain turning down reality because it feels overwhelmed and it's just trying to survive. Whatever tasks you had on your day, that doesn't matter. That's not part of survival. Your brain is literally just trying to survive. And I think that some of it too is honestly not even the brain just protecting itself. It's just the pure physical effect of setting off fireworks, like starting a fire inside your brain. It's going to change how things feel and how your brain works. And some people do actually get like physical visual disturbances and stuff too. Like you actually get changes, see weird stuff in your vision. So, why does derealization feel so disturbing? When your perception of the world around you shifts and you don't feel fully present, you start to question yourself. You wonder if you're losing your mind and you wonder if this is permanent and this is who you are now. And you're like, oh my gosh, like I feel crazy. I feel like I'm losing my mind. And layer that on top of chronic illness, chronic symptoms. So you're already tired, you're already inflamed, you're already just trying to survive. And again, it's already destabilizing when your body is sick, but it's terrifying when your sense of reality feels unstable on top of that. And it can lead to a lot of hopelessness. It makes it hard to get up and move through your day when we're having derealization because a lot of our joy and excitement and even our sense of peace is like really blunted. So, why Lyme and autoimmunity? Why are those big triggers of this type of neuroinflammation that causes specifically derealization? And it's because Lyme and autoimmunity directly cause neuroinflammation. There's a lot of other things in our body, like you could have a urinary tract infection. And unless it gets severe enough to the point where it's actually some bacteria is going in your bloodstream, then we're probably not going to have neuroinflammation from having this UTI. Although, when this is pretty common in elderly populations to not even know someone has a UTI, and the first sign is actually confusion. So, at some point, if it gets severe enough, it can. But generally, we're talking about infections that are affecting our body systemically on a whole body scale. And I just want to point out that Crohn's, for example, which is an autoimmune condition I have, is very much known as being a gut autoimmune condition. It actually affects your whole body. We categorize these autoimmune conditions by that's thyroid autoimmunity, that's autoimmunity in your joints, that's autoimmunity in your gut. But really, autoimmunity is actually a systemic immune shift. And so, if your immune system throughout your entire body shifts, then you're actually going to end up with inflammation everywhere. And some autoimmune conditions are more likely to cause neuroinflammation than others. Like lupus is a pretty strong one, MS is a pretty strong one, but it's pretty much a possibility with any severe autoimmunity that's not able to be well treated or well kept under control. Lyme and autoimmunity also cause cytokine cascades. So this is basically your body's fire alarm signaling pathway, and it gets activated and the fire alarm is just shouting, flooding out this inflammation. Come here, pay attention here. There's a threat here. Come and resolve this. It is dumping inflammation. And so, when there's something that specifically causes your body to have that type of inflammation dump, then it's pretty severe and it can end up affecting our brain. And so, COVID is probably one of our first viruses in the cold family that is capable of causing this level of neuroinflammation. Any kind of really severe infections, like COVID can cause this. There's a lot, molds can cause this too. So something that's going to be big level inflammation. Blood-brain barrier disruption is a big part of this. So we have this really cool natural barrier that our body uses to keep bacteria and bad things from entering our brain and protect our brain, because our brain is our master command center, our biological CEO of our whole body. So if our brain gets compromised, we're in big trouble. So we try to keep this out. But there are actually types of inflammation that make this blood-brain barrier leaky so things can pass through it. Think of it as poking holes in it from the inflammation. And interestingly, this is just an aside, our blood-brain barrier actually mirrors our gut-brain barrier. Or rather, our gut barrier has its own access with our brain. So if we have a permeable gut, which we call leaky gut, we're more likely to have a disrupted blood-brain barrier. The mast cell activation that happens with severe immune responses like Lyme and autoimmunity. And when I say Lyme, I'm including Bartonella, Babesia, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, all that stuff that we call under the Lyme umbrella. They're all under the Lyme umbrella because they're capable of these mass immune responses. And one of those is our mast cells, which is a type of white blood cell. They degranulate, so they get activated and they degranulate or release a ton of really specific inflammation, histamine being one of them. And a histamine is it's what releases when we have an allergic reaction to something. If someone has an anaphylactic reaction to a food and they eat it, that severe swelling that they get, which is severe enough to cause death within minutes, is coming from mast cells. So mast cells are huge. This isn't like just a calm little, like you cut your finger, we're going to have some inflammation there. So your body knows to come send some attention there. No, this is like life or death, mast cell, huge master fire alarm alert that your body is sounding off. And then also we can get hormonal shifts. And this isn't just like estrogen. This is like your entire signaling in your body. So our brain has hormones like MSH and leptin, and they actually control our cravings and our hunger and our fat storage. And they control things like how well we can fight off infections, how well we can sleep. They do indirectly balance our sex hormones. And then they control things like, are we more susceptible to get sinus infections and what's going on with our gut? Like we get actually a leaky gut barrier, which we know affects the blood-brain barrier if we get these brain hormones that are affected. So our brain is like the master controller of all of our hormones. If our brain hormones get their signaling disrupted, then the next steps of the cascade are going to be disrupted. An example of this would be think about your thyroid. We all have heard about thyroid hormone. Your brain has to send down a signal to your thyroid. So your brain sends TSH, which is a signal, down to your thyroid, and it tells your thyroid to make thyroid hormone. So that's why people get their thyroid tested to see if their TSH is high, is because if the TSH rises a lot, that means your brain is having to yell at your thyroid to make hormone. So that kind of shift, having to like yell at your thyroid to make hormone, is going to affect negative feedback loops and a bunch of downstream regulation. Specifically, there are a couple infections that are super neuroinflammatory, and Bartonella is probably one of the number one. And then Borrelia burgdorferi, which is classic Lyme. We can actually have neuroborreliosis, which means Lyme in the brain. And Bartonella has been found in a lot of tissues and people who are dealing with a lot of different mental health symptoms. And then even in patients who have MS, if your cerebrospinal fluid is tested, or actually in patients who have passed, when they do postmortem autopsies, there are a couple infections that are commonly found in the spinal fluid and directly in the brain. And some of those actually include parasitic infections and viruses like the Epstein-Barr virus. So these autoimmune type infections and the Lyme infections, which are actually one of the number one causes of autoimmunity in people I work with, have a really big impact on our whole system, and they end up affecting our brain. And our brain is the CEO of our whole body. So everything downstream shifts. Our pain perception shifts. Our brain can't regulate inflammation in other places in our body. Our brain can't tell our body how to get good sleep. And then that's kind of a endless cycle there, because the less sleep you get, then the more inflammation you get. So when we have this inflammation in our brain, going back to our mental symptoms here, we get that shift in perception. And then when we get a day where we have a little bit of a break in our inflammation, reality feels more solid again. Usually there's a fluctuation like this, and that fluctuation is key. The inconsistency itself is a clue that this is functional and physiologic, meaning this is our body responding to a threat, and this is fluctuating inflammation versus being something really fixed, like a primary psychiatric condition, or something really fixed, like a structural issue, like a mass somewhere. So some days feeling clear, grounded, more present, other days feeling that unreal feeling, foggy, really disconnected. That inconsistency tells us that this is state-based. This isn't necessarily permanent. And this isn't identity-based. A lot of people are like, am I becoming someone else? No, your brain is just shifting states. And I'll talk more in the future about these different states. They're actually part of the cell danger response, which is that fire alarm of inflammation, and then what happens from there. And the cell danger response pretty much explains what happens in chronic illness people who get stuck. So we'll talk about that in the future. So, what actually helps when you're having derealization? You think it's tied to your chronic condition, whatever you have, whether you know you have Lyme or an autoimmune, or whether you just feel like it and you have a ton of inflammation. The first step that needs to happen is lowering brain inflammation. A lot of people skip to things like, I'm going to try to regulate my nervous system, or I'm just going to try to eat better and that'll fix it. But we can't follow through on those things, and we can't even have successful safety signaling to our brain until we've lowered brain inflammation enough that our brain can function. So we need a functioning brain that can even adapt and handle the next steps first. That is number one. So we usually lower this neuroinflammation, the brain inflammation, by stabilizing those mast cells so they're not releasing histamine and leukotrienes and all these other super potent inflammatory things. We want to regulate glutamate. That's that firestorm. That's the gas pedal pushed down. High glutamate actually causes seizures. We want to support the vasculature in the brain, so the endothelium. If we don't have healthy circulation, we can't actually be getting nutrients and oxygen to our brain cells for our brain to work. And shockingly, inflammation in the brain actually damages our blood vessel lining. And so that's something that we can help repair. And then sleep. So if we're not getting good sleep, we're stuck in this spiral of, again, if we're not getting good sleep, everything physically gets worse. So then we get worse sleep. So we have to come in and do some things to actually support sleep to break that cycle. Then next, we're able to do a little bit more nervous system stuff. So this is like, how can we change some of our brain's thought patterns? What would it take to think a different way, to feel a different way in your body, to have a different relationship with your body, to have a different relationship with this derealization, depersonalization feeling? And so a lot of this comes with safety signaling. So helping our brain feel safe enough to downregulate from being in fight or flight and go back into a rest, heal, and digest state. And so this is gradual. And a lot of this is tied in with examining some of those subconscious beliefs that we don't even know we have about our health and how it affects us and what this means in our lives to be having symptoms like this going on. And then next step would be like, how can we address the drivers behind this inflammation? Can we calm the autoimmune activation? Can we lower the infection burden? Can we stabilize the cell signaling and the health of the cells? So overall, those are the three big categories for this. And obviously, what tools are used within each one is going to vary really widely based on the person, risk factors, health history, whether someone's taking blood thinners, whether someone's taking blood pressure meds, what else has happened if you have cardiovascular risk, all that kind of things. And then also it's going to change based on your specific tolerability, because when we get to the point of brain inflammation, we usually start getting either nervous or sensitive to supplements. So it's really hard to take stuff, or we are really sensitive. Our system is sensitive, and we end up having a hard time tolerating things. So if you're experiencing derealization, I have been there. Mine was due to Bartonella, and it is awful. And I feel for you so much. I would not wish this on my worst enemy. Luckily, I don't have any enemies yet, but if I did, I would not wish this on them. And it truly feels like you're going crazy. And while I was experiencing this, one of the most notable things, I'll be honest, I hadn't truly understood why people just felt like they totally gave up or couldn't be in this world anymore. But you start to understand that once your brain is super inflamed, because your brain feels so broken, you can't feel any joy or peace anymore. And you literally feel like you are in that simulation. You're like, nothing feels real. And so if nothing feels real, there's no consequences to anything. So it's a super awful state to be in. It's super uneasy feeling. It's super ungrounded. We don't feel connected to ourselves, which is a terrible way to feel. And if you're someone who's spiritual, it feels so disorienting to not feel like you're in touch with your soul, your spirit, yourself. So it's really hard to go through. but you're not crazy. You are not broken. You're not spiritually broken. You're not permanently dissociated. Inflammation is changeable. And this does happen often in Lyme, mold, autoimmune flares, and other things that cause severe inflammation response in the body. And this does improve as inflammation improves. So when the brain is inflamed, your perception changes. Whenever you notice your perception change, just remind yourself, okay, this is inflammation. I'm not going to make any big decisions right now. I'm not going to take what I'm feeling as that serious. Honestly, I'm not going to take it seriously because I know that this is an altered state. And when my inflammation calms in the future, I'm going to feel solid again. And it absolutely is possible to feel solid again and get that inflammation lowered, even if you weren't able to treat what you think is the root cause. If you didn't have success yet in going after your Lyme or in getting your autoimmune condition into remission, that doesn't mean that you can't lower your brain inflammation. You actually can lower your brain inflammation. And lowering your brain inflammation first shifts your brain state so your cells are no longer in the danger response. And then you leave that free state and then healing can actually happen. So the Lyme treatments can work, the autoimmune biologics can work, all of that stuff. Next month, we're going to talk about the cell danger response so we can dive into this a little bit more. But if you're dealing with this, hang in there, and I hope that some of this was helpful. Thank you for tuning in to Surviving to Thriving. If you enjoyed today's episode, share it with a friend and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. This show is for education and inspiration, not medical advice. For tools and next steps to restore your health, energy, and peace of mind, visit my website or connect with me online. The links are in the show notes. Until next time, keep believing. Thriving is possible for you.